My sister said, "Go find another table at family dinner because I was adopted," and handed me a $3,270 bill. I grew up trying to believe that one day I would be treated as part of the family. When I was invited to a dinner with all of them, I thought that, finally, I had earned my place at the table. But a few cold words, indifferent glances, and an absurd bill silently pushed my way were enough for me to understand that, for them, I was never more than a convenient mistake. But that same day, a woman I had never seen before appeared and changed the course of my life forever. Today my story is about pain, resilience, and the courage to break the cycle of injustice. If you have ever felt excluded, devalued, or ignored, I hope my words touch your heart. I am immensely grateful for your presence here. Follow along until the end and comment from which city you are reading so I can feel how far my story has reached. I was nervous but excited. The last time I was with them in public was on my 18th birthday, and even then I was almost forgotten at the corner table. But this time it was different. I had been formally invited, with a message from Patricia herself saying that the family wanted to reconnect. I put on my best dress and went with a hopeful heart. Perhaps deep down I still believed I could be treated like a real person. As soon as I arrived at the restaurant, I noticed the looks. Victoria didn't even bother to hide her disdain, and Gregory faked a cold smile. "There's our favorite confectioner," Patricia said, already handing me her purse for me to hang up. I chuckled awkwardly, trying to figure out if it was a joke. It wasn't. Throughout dinner they asked me to call the waiter, get napkins, pour wine. No one asked how I was or even mentioned my confectionery, which had just won a local award. I just smiled, trying to maintain my composure. The jokes came in sequence. "You must know a lot about sugar, right, Rachel? After all, you spend your life sweetening your own reality." Victoria laughed loudly. Kenneth lowered his eyes, as always. When I tried to change the subject, Patricia interrupted. "Darling, let's let those who work with cake take care of what they know, shall we?" The general laughter hit me like a slap. This wasn't a reconciliation dinner. It was a play where I played the role of a servant, as I always had. When the waiter brought the bill, everyone fell silent. The paper was placed right in the center of the table, but no one picked it up. Gregory cleared his throat. "We don't have to pay for her, do we? She already has her own company." I paid the $3,270 as if it were natural. My card went through on the first try, but my soul cracked. No one thanked me. No one even looked me in the eye. The table rose as if nothing had happened. I sat for a few seconds watching the empty glasses, the used cutlery, the crumpled napkins. That table said more about my life than any family photograph. I slowly got up like someone carrying centuries on their shoulders. Outside, the night air embraced me with more kindness than my family had ever shown. I walked towards the parking lot, trying not to cry. Something in me was breaking, but something else was rising. I remembered the years I worked to pay for college, the sleepless nights preparing sweets, the deliveries in the rain. No one gave me anything. I fought for every penny, for every compliment, for every loyal customer. On the sidewalk, I took a deep breath and leaned against the wall, like someone seeking support to keep from collapsing. My heels pinched my feet, but what really hurt was the emptiness. I had dreamed of a dinner of love, and I received another lesson in contempt. I closed my eyes for an instant. When I opened them, I saw the black car parked with tinted windows. The back door opened by itself. The driver didn't get out. Something called me. I approached slowly. Inside, an elderly woman with white hair and imposing eyes watched me with serenity. "Come in, Rachel. We need to talk." The upholstery was soft, the perfume gentle, and the woman's eyes more intense than anything I had ever faced. She held an elegant cane, and her presence was undeniable. "My name is Dorothy Hayes," she said as the car began to move. I remained silent. "You don't know me, but you should. I am your biological grandmother." I swallowed hard. Was this a joke? A scam? But she continued with firmness. "The time for truth has come." The restaurant hall was full again, but this time the tension was palpable. I had been invited again by the Collins family, but now as an escort, and Dorothy insisted on coming with me. Without warning, she entered arm in arm with me, dressed like royalty. There was an unsettling silence as she walked straight to the head of the table. Gregory tried to stand up, but she ignored him and sat down with absolute dignity. Now we have a table for the real ones, she murmured. The glasses timidly clinked, but no one knew how to react. Victoria hunched in her tight dress, visibly uncomfortable. Patricia forced a smile, trying to maintain her composure. I sat beside Dorothy, still not understanding why she insisted on being there. The waiter brought champagne and she raised her glass. She lightly tapped it with a silver utensil and asked for silence. I have an announcement, she said with a clear and firm voice. Everyone stopped. Victoria rolled her eyes. Gregory crossed his arms. This isn't the place for this sort of thing, Mrs. Hayes, Patricia said, trying to maintain her composure. Dorothy merely smiled, as if she had already anticipated the reaction. Truth never chooses a place. It simply comes. There was something in her demeanor that silenced any attempt to retort. She was the only one in the room who seemed to be there out of conviction, not interest. I felt my heart quicken, not knowing why. She turned to me with tenderness, then looked at everyone and said clearly, "My entire inheritance goes to Rachel Bennett." The sound that followed was that of a glass shattering on the floor. Victoria had let the crystal slip from her hand. Wine spread like blood on the white marble. The room fell silent. Gregory coughed. Patricia put her hand to her mouth. Kenneth finally raised his eyes to me. I remained motionless. Not even Dorothy had told me that. I was paralyzed. And yet, something in me began to breathe differently. Dorothy did not back down. Everything is signed. Everything is registered. It's not a promise. It's an act. Patricia tried to get up, but Walter, the lawyer I hadn't even noticed arrive, appeared beside her with folders in hand. "Excuse me," he said. "I am a legal witness to the signing registered yesterday." Dorothy raised her chin. "This is a dinner. But it is also a historic moment." She spoke as if decreeing reality. Victoria composed herself and stood up, her hands trembling. "This is absurd. She's not even part of the family." Dorothy turned to her coldly. "You're right. That's why I decided to change the course of things." Kenneth subtly pulled his chair back, trying to distance himself from his sister. Gregory remained silent. The once vibrant hall was now a contained battlefield. And in the midst of it all, me, sitting taking deep breaths, not knowing whether to cry or to be grateful. Walter carefully opened the folder. "All documents have been filed with the notary, with recognized signatures. There is nothing to contest," Dorothy added. "Signed yesterday. Irrevocable." Silence once again dominated the room, but this time it was a silence of surrender. No one expected that turn, even less so me. I felt a mixture of fear and relief. Fear of what was to come. Relief that, for the first time, someone saw me. Someone chose me. Patricia bit her lips, trying to contain her fury. Victoria sat down again, as if she had been knocked down. We were sitting on a discreet veranda of Dorothy's mansion, surrounded by hydrangeas and a respectful silence. The sky was painted a serene blue, contrasting with what she was about to tell me. She held my hand firmly and took a deep breath before speaking. "Rachel, I have pancreatic cancer. Terminal." The words fell like stones in my mind. I couldn't react immediately, I just stared at her in shock. "The doctors gave me a few months, maybe less. But it's not wasted time." She spoke with a tranquility that disarmed me. "I fought hard, but now I fight in another way. With dignity, with purpose." Her voice trembled a little, but her gaze remained fixed on mine. I felt a lump in my throat, as if all the rejections of life had not prepared me for this. I barely knew her and yet it hurt. She squeezed my hand now with more force. "I have little time, but enough time to do what's right." In that instant everything changed. She wasn't just giving me an inheritance. She was giving me a chance to re-signify my story. The woman before me wasn't just my grandmother. She was the bridge between the pain of the past and the possibility of a just future. And she was willing to fight for me. I have little time, but enough time to do what's right. Walter arrived the next day with a navy blue folder and a serious expression. Dorothy gathered us in the library, an immense room smelling of leather and old books. "We will immediately begin the legal protection of Rachel," she said. Those words seemed to belong to another world. I didn't know what that meant, but I understood it was serious. Walter explained that it included asset transfers, protective contracts, and a detailed dossier on the Collins. He spoke clearly, but it was as if my brain was on a different rhythm. It hadn't fully sunk in yet. We don't just want to guarantee your right to what is yours, Rachel, Dorothy said. We want to prevent them from taking it from you again. With each document signed, with each clause explained, I felt armor forming around me. One I never had before. One made of justice. Walter made sure I understood everything. You are not here as a pawn in a game, Rachel. You are the player now. Dorothy smiled proudly. And we are going to equip you for this game. Despite all the weight of the moment, there was something liberating about that preparation. I was no longer a spectator of my life. I was becoming the protagonist. And it all started with that detailed plan Walter brought. Tomorrow morning we start everything. Later, still impacted by everything, I asked Dorothy what made her trust me so much. Why me? Was all I could say, trying to hide my insecurity. She leaned back in the armchair and looked at the horizon, as if searching for words in her memory. Because you asked for nothing. And yet you did everything right. I remained silent. I had never heard anyone say something like that to me. She continued. You were rejected, ignored, used. But you chose to work, to build, to maintain your essence. That is rare. Her voice choked for the first time. I have known many powerful people, but few are integrous. And you are. Her words cut through me like a healing ray. For the first time I felt that someone saw who I really was. Not what I represented. Not what I could offer. But who I was. I kept looking at her, trying to hold back tears. Dorothy wasn't just a benefactor. She was the first person to recognize me as someone worthy of love and protection. That woman, sick and tired, was rewriting the end of a cycle of abuse with me. With her, I felt there was a place in the world that could, finally, embrace me without asking for anything in return. Rachel cries for the first time, not from pain but from relief. Walter called me into Dorothy's house meeting room with a grim expression. On the table, a stack of papers organized with red labels. Rachel, what I'm about to show you might be difficult to hear, he began. I sat down with a pounding heart. He revealed that he had discovered something serious. The adoption fund created in my name, when I was taken in by the Collins family, was completely embezzled. The amount? $750,000. My stomach churned. This fund was created to guarantee your education, your well-being, your future, Walter said. But it was never used for you. His words made me dizzy. It was like discovering that years of suffering could have been avoided, that my struggle could have been less lonely. My eyes stung, and I had to take a deep breath to keep from losing control. All of that had been denied, stolen, hidden. Walter opened the reports and showed transfers, signatures, fake invoices. The documents leave no doubt, he explained. They used that money to renovate the house, pay for trips, buy cars. The realization hit me with the force of an avalanche. I almost fainted right there. Every difficulty I faced, every debt I incurred, every sleepless night now took on a new meaning. It had been the consequence of a theft. Rachel almost faints. That money. It could have changed my life. Dorothy didn't waste time. As soon as Walter finalized the details, she gave the order. Let's file the civil lawsuit immediately. Her voice was firm, with no room for hesitation. Walter already had everything ready. With a few clicks, he filed the lawsuit and the case now became public. My heart raced. Justice doesn't wait for the comfort of those who made the mistake, Dorothy said. It happens when someone has the courage to break the silence. A few hours later, Patricia called. For the first time, she seemed desperate. There was no more haughtiness, no soft voice. It was a muffled cry of fear. Dorothy looked at the phone screen and ignored it. She knows she's lost control, she commented. Now she'll try to manipulate with pity. I felt a strange relief, as if finally the masks were falling. Those who had always made me feel small now trembled before the truth. Gregory also tried to contact Walter. Victoria sent long and contradictory messages, ranging between threats and pleas. None of them received a response. Dorothy was determined. It was not a time for dialogue. It was a time for exposure. That truth that had been shelved for so many years was now in the hands of justice. And this was just the beginning. Patricia calls desperately, but Dorothy refuses to answer. News of the lawsuit leaked in less than 24 hours. It was inevitable. The case of a billionaire revealing embezzlement of funds from her own family was pure headline material. Reporter Jennifer Cole was the first to call me. I hesitated, but Dorothy advised me to allow the interview. It's better to control the narrative now than to remedy it later. I agreed, even though I knew it would open public wounds. In the interview, I tried to be sincere, but Jennifer seemed more interested in controversies than in justice. The article aired that same night, and the tone chosen was harsh. They painted me as the resentful orphan, now seeking revenge. The images were cropped, the story poorly told. Unlikely heiress accuses perfect family of theft, read the headline. The effect was immediate. The internet reacted like a loose beast. Cruel comments, montages with my face, anonymous messages. What I never imagined began there, public lynching. Those who once ignored me now hated me. Without knowing who I was, without knowing what I had lived, I was forced to close the studio for safety. But something inside me knew. I wouldn't go back. The truth hurt, but it was mine. The wave of online defamation against Rachel begins. At first it was just a nasty comment. Then dozens. Soon hundreds. I was called a gold digger, a scammer, a usurper. Montages of my face circulated on anonymous profiles, portraying me as someone who destroyed a perfect family for money. What hurt wasn't the lie, it was the fact that people believed it. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Old clients canceled orders. I was forced to close the studio. I stood before the glass door with the closed indefinitely sign and felt an emptiness opening inside me. The confectionery was my refuge, my years of effort. Now it was being destroyed by an unjust public judgment. Dorothy tried to comfort me, but even she showed concern. They want to silence you with shouts, she said. We will make you heard. Walter then proposed a press conference. I hesitated. If you don't tell your story, they will tell it for you, Walter said firmly. It was true. But to expose myself again? To face cameras and microphones, to relive everything in public? Seemed impossible. Still, something in me said that fleeing was no longer an option. You are not the victim they describe, Dorothy insisted. I took a deep breath. I needed to show who I was, even if my voice trembled. Walter proposes a press conference to change the narrative. The room reserved for the press conference was packed. Lights, cameras, microphones all pointed at me and Dorothy. Beside me, Walter gave final instructions. When everything began, it was she who took the lead. Her voice, though tired, was still firm. I have an important announcement to make, Dorothy said. I have terminal cancer. And before I pass, I want to correct injustices committed against my granddaughter, Rachel Bennett. Shock coursed through the room like lightning. The flashes intensified. She continued, revealing that the Collins had diverted funds intended for my upbringing, and that there was incontestable proof on file. Walter displayed documents on large screens. This wasn't just a confession. It was a meticulous exposition of the truth. At the end, Dorothy held my hand and said, "Her pain is not an invention. It has been silenced for too long." The reaction was not unanimous. Some journalists asked biting questions, others applauded. On social media, comments were divided. Some doubted, others began to question the Collins. But for the first time, my version gained space. They underestimated you because you were always discreet, Dorothy said. But the truth doesn't need to shout to be heard. I didn't know what to expect from then on. But I knew I wasn't alone anymore. Mixed public reaction. But something changes. Walter encouraged me to make a statement. I felt my hands sweat, my throat tighten. But when I picked up the microphone and looked at the cameras, I thought of only one thing: telling my truth. My name is Rachel Bennett. I was adopted at 8 years old. I believed I would have a family. But what I received was silence, contempt, and exploitation. The words flowed as if they had waited a lifetime for that moment. I spoke of the diverted fund, the constant contempt, the absence of affection. I told how I was treated like a servant in my own home. But I also spoke of the confectionery, the daily struggle, the dreams I built with my own hands. I never asked anyone for anything. I just wanted respect. When I finished, the hall was silent. There were no questions. There were tearful eyes. For the first time, I was heard. As a human. As a woman. I felt that something had been torn from inside me. Not a weight, but a prison. I looked at Dorothy, who nodded with watery eyes. Walter smiled discreetly. It was as if my story finally had a legitimate place in the world. But before I could breathe a sigh of relief, a sound cut the silence. Hurried footsteps, heels loudly hitting the marble floor. Victoria Collins invaded the stage, her eyes ablaze. Victoria invades the stage, out of control. Victoria grabbed the microphone before anyone could stop her. The security guards hesitated, confused by the scene. "Enough of this charade," she shouted, her voice trembling with rage. This girl only had what she had because she was raised by us. She never would have opened any confectionery if it weren't for our structure. The hall was in shock. I remained still. Victoria trembled but did not back down. And then she said what would change everything. Raising this girl was profitable, yes. We profited from every order she made at home, from every fair where she sold our sweets. Everything was hers on paper, but it was ours in our pockets. The confession came out like poison, unfiltered. Walter stood up, alerted. The cameras recorded everything. The audience, until then divided, now had a witness. And a confession. Victoria finally had said too much. She still tried to justify herself. She said it was all a misunderstanding, that I should be grateful. But it was too late. Every word of hers was another brick in the wall of truth that was rising. Dorothy remained silent, firm, as if she had expected this. Inside, I felt astonishment turn into courage. What had hurt me for so long was now finally exposed to the world. Cameras capture everything. Tense atmosphere. In the following hours, the video circulated everywhere on the internet. News sites, influencer profiles, analysis channels. Everyone commented on Victoria's outburst. The most shared excerpt was precisely the phrase, "Raising her was profitable, yes." The public reaction was immediate. Insults against me gave way to indignation against the Collins. The tide was turning, and this time in my favor. For the first time, I didn't have to defend myself. The facts spoke for themselves. Walter received a call from the local prosecutor. "We want a complete copy of the documents you mentioned at the press conference," he requested. The video, combined with the already public records, raised serious evidence of financial crime and exploitation. Dorothy readily agreed. "The truth has arrived, Rachel. And now it's a matter of time." I didn't know what to feel. It was all still recent, but for the first time it seemed possible to breathe without fear. The exposure had been brutal but necessary. My public image was now seen with different eyes. Messages of support arrived from all over the country. People said that my story represented so many other silenced ones. And I felt like an open wound, beginning to heal. The pain was still there, but something new was budding. Hope and justice. Prosecutor requests opening of criminal investigation. Dorothy, though frail, insisted on being present when Walter prepared to send the documents to the public prosecutor's office. "I don't trust only in the justice of men," she said. "But if it can serve something good, then we will use it." The files included bank statements, contracts, emails, testimonies. Everything meticulously organized. Walter was meticulous. And now he was determined to make every letter of that dossier count. "They didn't just embezzle money. They kidnapped a life," Walter said. That hit me hard. It was true. It wasn't just about the lost money, but about the time, the opportunities, the childhood. Dorothy nodded. "This lawsuit isn't about revenge. It's about restitution." The papers were sent. And in less than 2 days the response arrived. The judge had granted the request. A judicial warrant was on its way. Walter received the notification the next morning in hand. It came sealed, signed, and with a scheduled date for the hearing. My heart pounded. It was real. They would have to explain themselves. The truth finally would have a place in a courtroom. Dorothy smiled, even with tired eyes. "Now it's up to you, my granddaughter. Tell them who you are." I took a deep breath. For the first time, I wasn't afraid to be heard. Walter receives notification of the hearing. The courtroom was full but silent. The benches occupied by curious onlookers, journalists, and some faces that were once close. Dorothy was by my side, fragile but attentive. Walter organized the documents in his leather briefcase, while the Collins lawyer whispered with Gregory. Victoria avoided my gaze. When Judge Morrison entered, everyone stood up. The weight of the moment was tangible in the air. The session began with the reading of the case. Each accusation, each piece of evidence, each clause of the will. Gregory tried to defend himself with vague phrases. Patricia used the discourse of wounded motherhood. Victoria oscillated between arrogance and tears. I told my story without resentment but with truth. My voice trembled at times but never gave way. I was there whole with everything I had lived, ready to be heard. After hours of testimonies, the judge called for silence. Her gaze swept over all the faces before her. "Justice is not emotion, it is balance," she said. "But there are cases where the truth speaks too loudly to be ignored." My heart pounded. I knew this was the moment. Dorothy held my hand gently. The judge raised her chin. "My decision is ready." The judge calls for silence. "My decision is ready." "The evidence is irrefutable," Judge Morrison began. "Dorothy Hayes' will is legitimate and reflects her lucid and legally expressed wishes." The words sounded like liberation. Furthermore, the documents prove financial embezzlement by the Collins family to the direct detriment of Ms. Rachel Bennett. There was a murmur in the audience. The judge continued, imperturbable. "I order restitution in the amount of $2,300,000, with a maximum period of 90 days. Patricia immediately paled. She staggered and fainted right there, supported by Kenneth. Victoria screamed, as if trying to prevent the inevitable. "This is absurd. This is a circus." Officers firmly restrained her. Gregory lowered his head, unresponsive, and I just took a deep breath. It wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, and it finally had a name: mine. The judge also determined protective measures, asset freezing, and legal monitoring to ensure compliance with the decision. Rachel Bennett was a victim of negligence and exploitation, and yet she remained dignified, she concluded. Walter nodded lightly. Dorothy smiled proudly. In that cold and formal room, something warm and liberating spread within me. I was free. Patricia faints. Victoria leaves screaming. At the end of the hearing, the judge called me back to the center of the room. "Rachel, your demeanor was admirable. You represented the hope of those who never had a voice." My legs almost gave out, but I stood tall. The judge firmly shook my hand. "Justice has been served." Dorothy cried softly. Her hands trembled but her eyes shone. Walter handed over the sealed documents. Everything was resolved. We left the room unhurriedly. Each step seemed to close a chapter of my life. Outside, the sun greeted us with soft light. The crowd watched us, but it no longer intimidated me. There was something in me that could no longer be erased. Dorothy took a deep breath beside me. Her eyes turned to me with affection and serenity. And then she said, as if closing a cycle, "Dorothy says, now I can rest in peace." A few days later, the inevitable happened. Dorothy passed away in her sleep, with a serene expression and her hands clasped over her chest. The news hit me like a cold breath. But there was no despair. There was gratitude. The funeral was simple, as she wished, held in the garden of the house where we had grown together these past few months. Children from social projects she had helped came to pay their respects. It was there that her true family was. The flowers were placed by small, sincere hands. Thomas, her faithful driver, now a friend, stood by my side throughout the ceremony. Walter spoke with elegance and emotion. I, silent, simply observed every gesture. When I touched the urn with her ashes, I felt something move inside me. It was not pain but reverence. Dorothy was more of a mother to me than anyone else. At the closing, I held Thomas's hand firmly. "She changed everything," I whispered. And he just nodded with watery eyes. The sky seemed to respect that moment, with still clouds and a calm wind. For the first time, saying goodbye to someone was not abandonment. It was a celebration of legacy. And what a legacy! Dorothy planted justice where there had been helplessness. And now it was my turn to water that inheritance with purpose. Rachel holds Thomas's hand. She changed everything. A few days after the funeral, Lawyer Walter summoned those closest to the reading of the final will. I didn't know what to expect. I had already received more than I could have imagined. But Dorothy, always a step ahead, had bigger plans. In the will, she stipulated the creation of a foundation in her name, aimed at adopted young people in vulnerable situations. Her fortune would now have a new destination. Hope. The document was detailed. Clear instructions, appointments, separate funds. Thomas would be the general administrator, Walter the legal advisor, and I, the founding president. When I heard my name, I felt a lump in my throat. She thought of everything, Thomas said. But mostly she thought of you. It was an immense mission, bigger than any plan I had ever had. But somehow it seemed like the natural next step. At that moment, I understood that Dorothy didn't just want to rescue me. She wanted to transform me into a beacon for others. Her last wish wasn't to give me a fortune, but a purpose. And that was greater than any figure. I felt overwhelmed by a mixture of responsibility and honor. The weight was real, but the direction was clear. This is bigger than me. The night after the reading was long. I stayed in the old library of the house, looking at Dorothy's photos, the books she loved, the carefully kept letters. I thought of the 8-year-old girl who arrived at the Collins house without knowing what belonging was. I thought of the 27-year-old woman who now carried a mission that honored the pain, but transcended it. And there I promised something to myself. I promised that I would live not as one who carries trauma, but as one who honors scars. That I would use every fall as an impulse to lift others. That I would not allow pain to define me, but that it would serve to rebuild. Dorothy gave me a new surname but also a new destiny. And it was time to fully embrace it, to let the past weigh less, and the future shine brighter. I wrote in a notebook the phrase I will repeat every time doubt strikes. Pain generates strength. Strength generates change. And I am made of that. The next morning, I began to sketch out the foundation's plans. Because it couldn't wait. Because the world needed light. And because now finally I knew what to do. Time to turn pain into purpose. The inauguration ceremony of the Dorothy Hayes Foundation was discreet but full of meaning. We held it in the same garden where she had been mourned, now transformed into a welcoming space. The chairs were occupied by young people from foster homes, teachers, psychologists, and volunteers. In the center of the stage, a bronze plaque with Dorothy's name and a phrase, "Transforming pain into direction." I read that motto as a daily vow. It wasn't about money. It was about life. The foundation opened with 3 fronts: education, emotional health, and employability. The team was formed by people who also carried difficult stories, but had the desire to make a difference. During the ceremony, I announced the first scholarship. A 17-year-old girl, talented in drawing, but without any family support. Upon hearing her name, she cried. So did I. It was the realization of what I had promised Dorothy. Seeing the emotion in her eyes was like going back in time and embracing my 8-year-old self. That girl who was not seen, not heard, now became the woman who reached out. There was no glory in it. There was truth. I didn't want to be remembered as the heiress of a fortune. I wanted to be known as someone who changed destinies. And that first scholarship was the first step of many. First scholarship is awarded. With the foundation up and running came the real challenge, managing everything responsibly. Thomas took over the management with precision and care. He knew Dorothy's values better than anyone. Every penny was documented, every decision was thought out in terms of real impact. Walter, in turn, created the Legal and Ethical Committee, ensuring that no external interference distorted the institution's mission. We were ready. Together we formed an unlikely but cohesive trio. Every meeting was marked by respect and purpose. It wasn't just work, it was a mission of the soul. I, who never saw myself as a leader, now made strategic decisions, approved projects, listened to stories of pain with active listening. And I always asked myself, would Dorothy approve of this? That question became my silent guide. And she always answered in my heart. A few months later, Jennifer Cole sought us out again. But this time her gaze was different. She wasn't looking for scandal. She came to tell a story of reconstruction. She interviewed young beneficiaries, spoke with educators, and published an article titled, "From Abandonment to Legacy: The Woman Who Broke the Cycle." When I read it, I cried. Not for the recognition, but because finally the world was understanding. Jennifer Cole writes a new article, now celebrating Rachel. One day, after an intense meeting, I walked alone through the streets of the neighborhood where it all began. I passed by the old bus stop where I had waited so many times with boxes of sweets in my arms. My feet unconsciously led me to the old studio door. The paint was peeling, the sign faded, but there was still life inside. I entered. The smell of vanilla seemed to be waiting for me. I felt it was time to reopen. I transformed the space into a confectionery school exclusively for adopted young people or those in situations of abandonment. There we teach techniques but also offer therapy, professional guidance, and affection. It wasn't just about teaching how to make cake. It was about teaching to believe that one can build something with their own hands. And most importantly, that there is a place in the world for those who have always been left behind. In the first class, 10 teenagers. All insecure with suspicious eyes but hungry for belonging. Each recipe prepared was like a brick rebuilding something within them. And I there, with an apron and an open heart, felt that I was finally where I always should have been. The foundation was big. But there in that reborn studio I found my essence. Now I belong. And I help others belong too. While my life flourished, the Collins faced the opposite effect. Investigations multiplied. Accounts blocked. Assets frozen. The media now called them the family who lived off abuse. Victoria lost advertising contracts. Gregory left the company where he was a partner. Patricia was removed from religious events she used to lead. And Kenneth tried to make contact. He sent messages. He called. He waited at the foundation's gate. But I didn't go to him. I read his messages. I listened to his voicemails. But I didn't respond. Because I had learned that forgiving is not going back. It's moving on without carrying those who dragged us down. He had chances. Many. He always chose silence. Now it was no longer appropriate. When Thomas showed me he was waiting at the gate, I just said, "Block him." And I turned my back with serenity. I no longer needed anyone's approval. My story no longer depended on those who ignored me. It grew on its own, nourished by purpose and truth. And it was in this spirit that I received the tribute from the City Council for Social Impact. I went on stage in a simple dress without extravagant makeup, but with a full heart. They applauded standing when I mentioned Dorothy. But I couldn't help it. My eyes searched for someone in the crowd. Rachel blocks him. Not this time. I took a deep breath before beginning my speech. The auditorium was packed. But I spoke as if I were in front of little Rachel, alone in a dark room. The past cannot be erased, I said. But it can be resignified. I spoke of adoption without affection, of silent violence, of the power of a true chance. I spoke of the legacy that is not money, it is dignity. I spoke with emotion but without bitterness. By forgiving, I do not forget. I merely choose not to carry what is not mine, I continued. The applause was strong, sincere. But inside me there was still an absence. An emptiness that no achievement seemed to fill. It was not pain. It was longing. Longing for Dorothy. Her firm gaze, her precise words, her way of making me feel capable. She was not physically there, but every step I took was with her. Thomas, by my side, whispered. She would be very proud. I nodded, holding back tears. It was true. And even with the entire auditorium on their feet, I felt alone for an instant. Not because I was alone, but because the absence of those we love is never unfelt. But I continued, because that's what Dorothy taught me. To keep going even with pain. Standing ovation. But her eyes searched for a presence. After the event, as I greeted people, a young woman approached. She had timid eyes and an envelope in her hands. "Excuse me for bothering you," she said. "I just wanted to give you this." I took the envelope and, opening it, read a short but powerful letter. It said, "You saved me without knowing me. Your story made me believe that I can have one too." My heart raced. It was like hearing little Rachel being hugged by someone in the future. The young woman gave me a shy smile and left before I could ask her name. I stood there holding that sheet as if it were a trophy. More valuable than medals, truer than headlines. It was the confirmation that everything had been worth it. That every tear, every fall, every injustice had brought me to that point. Where pain transforms into purpose, and the past becomes a bridge. I returned home that night with the letter in my pocket and a new peace in my heart. It was as if that phrase gave me new breath. You saved me without knowing me. I didn't need to save the world. But I could, yes, touch one heart at a time. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. It was the true victory. Rachel smiles moved. The true inheritance is this. Now, I'm curious about you who heard my story. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Have you experienced anything similar? Support the channel by subscribing, liking, commenting, and sharing this video. I'm leaving another story on the final screen that you will also like, and it will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.